Right now, you might be waiting for the perfect moment to start something important. That moment doesn't exist. And every day you wait, you lose progress, momentum, and confidence. In this video, you'll learn how to force yourself to stop waiting and take action immediately, no matter how uncomfortable it feels. By the end, you'll discover 10 practical strategies that will completely change the way you approach tasks, decisions, and goals. You'll learn how to pick priorities, break tasks into manageable steps, reward yourself for effort, and move forward even when mistakes happen. Each tip is designed to help you build discipline, consistency, and real results in your daily life. Subscribe now to Audiobook Shift to get more actionable strategies that help you grow, improve, and take control of your life. Watch carefully, apply these steps, and start seeing progress today. Number 1. Decide your deadline. Start now. There is a moment in every person's life when they feel the weight of delay pressing down on them. It is the quiet, familiar pressure of knowing they want more, knowing they could be further ahead, but still finding themselves paused in the same place as yesterday. People often tell themselves they are waiting for clarity, waiting for confidence, waiting for the right season or the right sign. But deep down, they know the truth. They are waiting for a perfect time that will never arrive. Life does not move on invitations. It moves on decisions. And the first decision that changes everything is choosing a deadline and beginning before comfort shows up. A deadline is not about pressure. It is about direction. It is the moment you draw a clear line between wanting something and committing to it. Without a deadline, your mind will always create space for delay. It will give you reasons to slow down, reasons to reconsider, reasons to believe there is always tomorrow. When a person has no boundary for action, the mind becomes creative in the wrong direction. It offers countless ways to postpone progress. But when a deadline is chosen, the mind becomes disciplined. It adjusts. It focuses. It stops negotiating. Choosing a deadline is an act of honesty. It forces you to see the truth about your intentions. If something truly matters, it deserves a clear commitment. If something keeps getting pushed aside, it reveals exactly how much it is being avoided. Many people resist deadlines because they fear failure, pressure, judgment, or change. But a deadline is not a trap. It is a promise to yourself that you will show up for what you say you want. It is the strongest sign that you are done waiting for a perfect moment and ready to begin from where you are. The mind always looks for comfort. It wants easy wins. It wants painless paths. It wants guarantees before effort. And because of this, waiting for confidence before taking action becomes one of the most common reasons people stay stuck. Confidence does not show up first. Confidence arrives after you start, after you take the first step, after you decide your goal will not float endlessly in the future. A deadline gives you the courage to begin without confidence. It gives you the structure to take action even when emotional resistance tries to stop you. Beginning now is not about speed. It is about responsibility. You cannot control the future, but you can control the next minute. You can control whether you stay still or move forward. Many people waste years because they underestimate the power of starting today. They believe small actions do not matter. They underestimate what a week of focused effort can do, what a month of consistent action can build, and what a year of showing up daily can transform. Starting now is how you break the cycle of hesitation. It is how you remove the illusion that you need more time, because more time does not create progress. Action does. The truth is, every goal becomes easier once you choose when it must be done. Without this, the mind has no urgency. It drifts. It loses clarity. Setting a deadline gives your mind a target. It gives your actions purpose. It tells your energy where to go. Think about how people behave when a real deadline exists. When an exam is approaching, when a flight is scheduled, when a job assignment must be submitted, there is movement. There is focus. There is no room for procrastination. The mind becomes sharper because it knows there is no choice. The task must be done. This same clarity and urgency can be applied to your personal goals, but only if you choose the moment when it must be completed. Many people wait for motivation before they begin. However, motivation is unreliable. It rises and falls based on mood, environment, and energy. A deadline does not depend on mood. It is a fixed point that demands respect. When you decide your deadline, motivation becomes optional, and discipline becomes essential. The shift is what separates those who achieve from those who stay stuck in endless planning. Discipline is the ability to act because it is needed, not because it feels good. And nothing builds discipline more effectively than a firm deadline. One of the most powerful things you can do is choose a date and commit to it even when you feel unprepared. Feeling ready is a luxury. Acting before readiness is a skill. Every person who reached a higher level began before they knew how things would unfold. They chose a path, chose a finish date, and adjusted along the way. You learn more from taking action than you ever will from waiting. You grow faster through movement than through overthinking. Most of the clarity you want appears after you begin, not before. Setting a deadline also changes the way you measure progress. When the mind knows the finish line is real, it stops wasting time on unnecessary tasks. It becomes efficient. It prioritizes. It questions distractions. You start asking yourself different questions. What truly matters right now? What moves me closer to my goal today? What can I finish before the day ends? These questions sharpen your focus. They cut away the habit of wasting time. They help you build a new identity, someone who acts with purpose instead of waiting for perfection. Starting now does not have to mean starting big. It means starting honestly. One small action taken today is more valuable than a perfect plan waiting for future approval. Many people wait for the perfect conditions, but conditions do not create success. Consistency does. You can take a small step right now. You can send the email, write the paragraph, walk for 10 minutes, clean one section of the room, read 2 pages, or learn one new idea. These actions seem small, but they create momentum, and momentum destroys hesitation. Once you begin, your mind shifts from avoidance to engagement. Movement pulls you forward. Deciding your deadline also teaches you responsibility for your life. It shows you that no one else is coming to push you. No one will force you to change. No one will lift you out of procrastination. Your life moves when you choose to move. This realization is powerful because it gives you control. It gives you the ability to reshape your future through decisions, not through waiting. When you take ownership of your timeline, you stop blaming circumstances and start controlling what you can influence. There is a quiet strength that comes from starting now. It is not loud or dramatic. It is steady. It is the feeling of knowing that you did not wait for courage. You did not wait for clarity. You did not wait for permission. You acted because the future you want deserves action today. Every time you choose to start now, you send yourself a message. You are capable. You are committed. And you are done letting hesitation rule your life. When you choose a deadline and begin immediately, you give yourself the gift of progress. Even if you stumble, even if the path is imperfect, you are still ahead of the person who stayed frozen in fear. Mistakes can be corrected, delays can be adjusted, but no progress can come from waiting for a perfect moment. Progress is born from action, not intention. A person who starts now has already unlocked the door that others spend years staring at. You deserve to see what your life looks like when you stop waiting and start acting. You deserve to look back and feel proud that you chose movement over fear, discipline over hesitation, and progress over perfection. The path ahead will not always feel comfortable, but comfort was never the goal. Growth is the goal, and growth begins the moment you choose your deadline and take your first step today. Everything can change from that decision. The direction of your life can shift from uncertainty to purpose. What once felt impossible can become your new reality, but it begins with one powerful choice. Decide your deadline and start now. Number 2, lower pressure. Begin tiny steps. There is a point in every journey where the weight of expectations becomes heavier than the work itself. Many people freeze, not because they lack ability, but because they set the bar so high that starting feels impossible. They picture the entire climb, the full transformation, the final result, and the size of it makes them feel small. When the mind believes the task is too big, it does what it has always done. It shuts down and waits. The path forward becomes blurry, and hesitation grows stronger. This is why lowering pressure is not about lowering standards. It is about creating a starting point that your mind is willing to accept. Big goals demand long-term commitment, but starting demands something far simpler, a step so small that your brain cannot reject it. When goals feel overwhelming, the mind reacts with avoidance. It pushes the task away to protect you from discomfort. But when the task is tiny, clear, and manageable, the mind relaxes. It feels safe. It feels capable. It no longer feels like it is being forced into a battle. This shift in pressure is powerful. It takes something that feels impossible and turns it into something you can begin in the next minute. Pressure rises when you expect yourself to master something instantly. People often think they need to transform overnight, and when they fall short, they feel defeated. But progress does not come from giant leaps. It comes from stacking small actions until they create a foundation strong enough to support bigger moves. A tiny step has more value than a perfect plan because a tiny step reshapes your identity. It tells you that you can begin. It tells you that you can continue. It builds the belief that you can handle more, one layer at a time. Imagine how much easier life becomes when you break your goals into pieces that feel simple instead of stressful. Reading a full book may feel intimidating, but reading a single page feels light. Cleaning an entire room may feel draining, but clearing one shelf feels manageable. Building a habit may feel overwhelming, but starting for 2 minutes feels possible. These small actions remove the tension that usually blocks progress. The mind accepts what feels gentle and clear. It resists what feels large and vague. Lowering pressure is a strategy, not a weakness. It is choosing to work with your mind instead of against it. You are not avoiding effort. You are making effort easier to begin. When something feels approachable, you are far more likely to return to it tomorrow. And consistency is what shapes long-term change. A tiny step, repeated daily, will always outperform a massive effort that burns out after one attempt. The mind thrives on sustainable movement, not intensity that collapses under its own weight. Starting with small steps also gives you room to learn, adjust, and adapt. When pressure is high, mistakes feel devastating. When pressure is low, mistakes feel normal. You are free to explore. You can build skills without expecting perfection. This freedom allows you to grow at a steady pace. You begin noticing subtle shifts, more confidence, clearer focus, stronger discipline. These shifts come from movement, not from flawless execution. High pressure often comes from comparison. People look at others who seem far ahead and expect themselves to match their pace instantly. But comparison ignores the years of small steps those people took to reach their position. Every expert started as a beginner. Every leader started with uncertainty. Every successful person began with steps so small they were barely noticeable. You do not need to match anyone's pace. You only need to honor your own. When pressure is lowered, your ability to act increases. The mind softens. The fear of failure loses strength. The fear of imperfection fades. You begin to show up more often because the task no longer feels like a test. It becomes part of your routine. It becomes something you do naturally without overthinking. This is the moment when discipline begins to form, not from force, but from consistency. Tiny steps have a quiet power. They accumulate. One small action becomes two. Two turn into 10. What once felt overwhelming becomes familiar. What once felt heavy becomes manageable. Your confidence grows not from big achievements, but from proving to yourself each day that you are capable of starting. You realize that progress is not about speed. It is about direction. It is about keeping yourself in motion, even when the path feels long. Lowering pressure also teaches patience. You begin to appreciate steady progress instead of demanding instant results. You understand that growth takes time, and you stop rushing the process. This patience strengthens your mindset. You become more resilient, more focused, and more grounded. You stop expecting miracles from yourself and start building real change through effort that you can maintain. This is how lasting transformations are created, not through intensity, but through repeatable action. A tiny step can be as simple as writing one sentence, walking for a few minutes, organizing one drawer, or starting a timer for a short amount of work. These steps require little energy, but they break the cycle of avoidance. Once you begin, momentum naturally appears. It becomes easier to continue than to stop, and that continuation is what carries you further than you ever expected. When you remove the weight of unrealistic expectations, you give yourself the chance to grow without fear. You give yourself permission to be human. You honor your limits while still moving forward. This approach does not make you weaker. It makes you unstoppable. People who rely on pressure burn out. People who rely on tiny steps build habits that last for life. Lowering pressure also reduces emotional resistance. Stress, fear, and perfectionism loosen their grip. You stop feeling guilty for not doing enough and start feeling proud for showing up at all. This shift changes your relationship with effort. Work stops feeling like a punishment and starts feeling like progress. You see movement where there used to be stagnation. You create hope where there used to be frustration. When you act through tiny steps, you no longer depend on motivation. You depend on structure. You depend on simplicity. You depend on actions so small that starting becomes automatic. The more often you take these steps, the more your identity shifts. You begin to see yourself as someone who takes action, someone who improves steadily, someone who chooses effort even when it feels small. This identity is the foundation of personal growth. Life becomes clearer when pressure is lowered. You focus on what you can do today, not on what you failed to do yesterday. You build your future through realistic actions instead of overwhelming plans. You see progress in the little things, and these little things create the big changes you once thought were out of reach. Everything begins with a step that feels simple enough to take right now. When you start with something tiny, you break the barrier that held you back for years. You open the door to consistency. You open the door to improvement. And most importantly, you open the door to the person you are capable of becoming. Lower the pressure. Begin the smallest step you can. That is how real growth begins. Number 3. Cut excuses. Do first action. There comes a moment when a person realizes that the only thing standing between them and the life they want is the collection of reasons they keep repeating. Excuses feel protective at first. They sound logical, reasonable, even responsible. They shield you from effort, from discomfort, from anything that challenges the familiar routine. But the truth is that excuses slowly replace potential with regret. They become a quiet barrier that blocks every step forward. Cutting excuses is not about being harsh with yourself. It is about becoming honest enough to stop letting your own thoughts limit your growth. Excuses tend to appear whenever you face something that matters. They show up when you feel fear, uncertainty, or pressure. The mind creates stories to keep you away from anything that feels unfamiliar. You tell yourself that you need more time, more energy, more motivation, or more clarity before you can begin. You convince yourself that today isn't the right day, that you're too distracted, too tired, or too overwhelmed. These stories become patterns, and once they become patterns, they become your default response to discomfort. The longer this continues, the harder it becomes to take action. Cutting excuses begins with recognizing them as choices, not truths. They are not facts. They are not laws. They are simply thoughts that you have repeated long enough to believe. Once you see them clearly, you remove their power. Instead of accepting them, you question them. You ask whether they are helping you or holding you back. You ask whether they reflect your goals or your fears. Most excuses crumble the moment you challenge them, because deep down, you already know they are not aligned with who you want to become. The first action you take after cutting an excuse is the most important part of the process. Action breaks the mental loop that excuses create. It shifts your attention from what might go wrong to what you can do right now. Action also changes your emotional state. When you act, even in a small way, your mind moves from doubt to engagement. You feel more capable because you prove to yourself that hesitation does not control you. Doing the first action does not require confidence or a detailed plan. It only requires movement. One step, even a small one, disrupts the cycle of delay. This is why focusing on the very first action matters more than thinking about the full journey. When you look at the entire path ahead, the mind becomes overwhelmed and starts searching for exits. But when you focus on the next move in front of you, excuses lose their ability to convince you to wait. Excuses thrive in the space between intention and action. The longer you hesitate, the louder the excuses become. They feed on delay. The more time you give them, the more persuasive they sound. This is why acting immediately, even if imperfectly, is so powerful. Action closes the door that excuses try to open. It shuts down overthinking and builds momentum. Once you begin, it becomes easier to continue. Many people believe that excuses are harmless, but they shape your identity over time. Every time you listen to an excuse, you reinforce the belief that you cannot handle discomfort. You reinforce the idea that growth is too difficult or too risky. This slowly erodes confidence. On the other hand, every time you take action instead of listening to an excuse, you strengthen the belief that you are capable, disciplined, and responsible for your direction. Over time, this becomes your default mindset. You stop relying on motivation and start relying on responsibility. Cutting excuses also requires accepting the truth that progress cannot be built on ideal conditions. Life is chaotic and unpredictable. There will always be interruptions, challenges, and imperfect moments. If you wait for complete readiness, you wait forever. Excuses often disguise themselves as preparation. You tell yourself you need more knowledge, more resources, or more certainty. But real growth comes from learning as you move, not from planning until the opportunity passes. The first action teaches you more than endless planning ever will. There is strength in choosing action, even when your mind is trying to convince you to pause. Taking action does not mean you will always succeed on the first try. It means you are willing to face reality instead of hiding behind stories. It means you value progress more than comfort. It means you refuse to let hesitation decide your future. People who reach meaningful goals are not free from excuses. They simply refuse to let those excuses dictate their choices. Sometimes excuses come from fear of failure, but just as often, they come from fear of success. Growth requires change, responsibility, and new expectations. It requires stepping into a version of yourself that you are not yet familiar with. The mind may resist this because it feels risky, but the cost of staying the same is far higher than the cost of taking the first step. When you cut excuses, you free yourself from that internal resistance. You give yourself permission to expand, to explore, and to build a life that reflects your potential instead of your fears. Doing the first action also simplifies the path forward. When you take one step, the second becomes easier to identify. You gain clarity through movement. You discover what works and what needs adjustment. You no longer rely on speculation. You rely on experience. This makes decision-making easier and progress more consistent. The path no longer feels like a giant leap. It becomes a series of manageable moves. Excuses also drain mental energy. They create internal debates that distract you from productive action. The more you negotiate with yourself, the more exhausted you feel before you even begin. Cutting excuses eliminates that mental noise. It clears your focus. It directs your attention to what you can control. You save energy for action instead of wasting it on argument. This alone can transform your productivity and your mindset. When you choose action over excuses, you also build a sense of self-respect. You keep the promises you make to yourself. You show yourself that your goals matter. You move in alignment with your values. This internal alignment creates peace. It removes the guilt and frustration that come from avoiding what you know you should be doing. It gives you a steady confidence that comes from integrity, not from outcomes. The first action can be as small as writing one sentence, sending one message, organizing one item, or taking one bite of the task. What matters is not the size of the action, but the willingness to act. Every action becomes a vote for the identity you want to build. The more votes you cast, the stronger that identity becomes. Eventually, taking action becomes natural, and excuses become weaker than ever. Cutting excuses is the beginning of personal power. It is the moment you stop letting fear, laziness, and doubt influence your decisions. It is the decision to lead your life instead of react to it. When you stop giving excuses space, you create room for growth, clarity, and progress. And when you take the first action, you begin a chapter of your life that is shaped by movement instead of hesitation. Your future will not be built on the reasons you gave for waiting. It will be built on the actions you finally decide to take. Cut the excuses. Do the first action. That simple commitment can change everything. Number 4. Track progress daily. Remove hesitation. There is a unique clarity that comes from seeing your own actions laid out in front of you. Most people think they lack discipline, motivation, or willpower, but what they truly lack is awareness of their daily choices. When days blend together, when effort is not measured, when improvement is not recorded, the mind loses direction. You start doubting yourself. You start questioning whether you're moving forward or staying still. Daily tracking removes that confusion. It turns vague intentions into visible results. And once results are visible, hesitation begins to fade. A person who tracks their progress is a person who refuses to live blindly. They do not rely on memory, because memory bends, blurs, and distorts. One day of effort can feel like a week. A week of distractions can feel like a day. This flexible perception of time is what creates the illusion that you're trying when you're not, or that you're failing when you're actually growing. Tracking anchors you to the truth. It gives you exact evidence of what you did, what you avoided, and what needs improvement. This clarity is not harsh. It is freeing. You no longer rely on emotions to judge your progress. You rely on facts. Tracking does not need to be complicated. It can be a line on a page, a check mark on a calendar, a few words in a notebook, or a simple digital log. What matters is consistency. A record of your daily actions becomes a map of your discipline. You see your patterns. You understand your habits. You notice what triggers productivity and what leads to avoidance. This awareness allows you to make adjustments intentionally instead of guessing your way through each day. Many people hesitate because they feel unsure whether their efforts matter. They work without seeing immediate results and assume that nothing is changing, but progress often grows quietly. You don't always feel it while it's happening. Tracking reveals that growth. It shows you that small steps are stacking up. It shows you that days you consider insignificant still carry value. When you see even small signs of progress, hesitation weakens. You feel encouraged to continue because you can clearly see that your actions count. Daily tracking also creates accountability. You are no longer floating through days without structure. You give yourself something to answer to. That accountability is not external pressure. It is internal responsibility. You hold yourself to the standard you set. The act of writing down what you did makes you reflect on your choices, and that reflection pushes you toward better decisions the next day. You start making progress not by force, but by awareness. Tracking helps eliminate another major source of hesitation, uncertainty about what to do next. When you record your actions each day, you gain context for the next step. You know what you completed, what you postponed, and what needs your attention. This removes the confusion that often causes people to delay action. You start each day with clarity instead of guesswork. The more direction you have, the less room hesitation has to grow. Daily tracking also strengthens discipline by building a streak. Humans are naturally wired to value continuity. When you see a chain of consistent effort, you become protective of it. You do not want to break. Even on low-energy days, you will push yourself to do something small just to keep the record alive. This mindset turns discipline into momentum, and momentum keeps you moving even when motivation is low. There is also power in reflecting on your progress at the end of each day. This reflection does not need to be long or dramatic. It can be a simple moment of honesty. You ask yourself what worked well, what slowed you down, and what you can improve tomorrow. This daily reflection keeps you grounded in action, rather than slipping into autopilot. It transforms each day into a lesson, instead of a blur. Small improvements compound faster than people realize, and tracking ensures that you never miss the chance to learn from your own behavior. Hesitation often comes from not knowing whether the effort is worth it. When results are unclear, the mind creates doubt. Doubt grows into delay. Delay turns into avoidance. Tracking interrupts this entire process. It shows you the truth. Even small actions lead somewhere. You may not see the final result yet, but you see movement. You see a path forming. You see yourself changing. And once you see that, it becomes much harder to stop. Another benefit of daily tracking is emotional regulation. When you don't track your progress, emotions become your primary source of judgment. You convince yourself that you're failing on days when you're actually improving. You convince yourself that you're doing enough on days when you barely moved. This emotional distortion creates both guilt and complacency. But when you track your actions, the emotions lose their control. You no longer rely on how you feel. You rely on what you did. This brings stability. Stability brings confidence, and confidence reduces hesitation. Tracking also makes your goals more approachable. When you break them down into daily actions, they feel less distant. You can see how each day contributes to the larger outcome. This builds patience because you recognize that success is a product of repeated effort, not sudden breakthroughs. You stop expecting instant changes and start appreciating steady movement. This mindset shift keeps you consistent even when progress feels slow. One of the most underestimated effects of daily tracking is the sense of pride it builds. When you look back at your record and see days filled with effort, even small effort, you begin to trust yourself more. You build a reputation with yourself. You become the kind of person who shows up. This internal reputation is stronger than external praise because it is earned through real actions. It stays with you even when no one else sees your work. And that kind of self-trust removes hesitation faster than anything else. Tracking your progress daily does not make your journey easier, but it makes it clearer. It turns a vague plan into a structured path. It removes unnecessary confusion. It keeps you honest, engaged, and aware. You may not control everything in your life, but you can control what you track. And once you take charge of your daily actions, hesitation no longer has space to grow. Progress becomes visible. Effort becomes measurable. Growth becomes intentional. When you see your path clearly, you walk it with more confidence. You take action without waiting for motivation. You move forward even when the day feels heavy. Step by step, your life shifts because you are paying attention to it. Track your progress daily, and hesitation will lose its influence. The person who watches their own growth becomes unstoppable. Number 5. Set timer. Start before comfort. There is a point in your day when you know exactly what you should begin, but you pause because it doesn't feel like the right moment. You wait for a burst of motivation, for more energy, or for a clearer mind. But the longer you sit there, the heavier the task feels. The truth is simple. You can break this entire cycle by using a timer and starting before your mind settles into its comfortable patterns. A timer removes the mental debate. It gives you a starting line you cannot argue with. Once it begins counting down, your only job is to move. Even if you feel unprepared, tired, or unsure, the timer takes the decision out of your hands and forces you to act. People often think discipline is about having strong willpower, but it's far more practical than that. Discipline grows when you train your brain to work on command, not on emotion. When you rely on feelings, you delay. When you rely on structure, you begin. A timer is pure structure. It has no interest in your mood or your excuses. It simply runs. By attaching your first action to a countdown, you eliminate hesitation and step into momentum quickly. This matters more than most people realize because hesitation multiplies. It grows louder the longer you let it sit. Starting before comfort shuts down that growth immediately. At the beginning, your mind will resist the idea of starting early. It will try to negotiate for a few extra minutes. It will suggest checking your phone, standing up, stretching, or rethinking your plan. These urges are predictable, and they appear for everyone. You're not facing a personal weakness. You're facing a human brain that prefers ease over effort. The timer helps redirect that instinct by giving your mind a clear, unavoidable signal. When the countdown begins, your attention locks in. Your brain switches from floating to focusing, and that shift alone can help you complete tasks you normally avoid. The purpose isn't to create pressure. The purpose is to build a habit of stepping into action without waiting for comfort to show up. Comfort is unreliable. It comes and goes depending on sleep, hunger, stress, weather, and countless small details you cannot control. If you depend on it, Your progress will always be inconsistent, but when you set a timer and start despite discomfort, you strengthen a new identity, one that acts even when conditions are not ideal. This identity is what separates people who achieve their goals from those who stay stuck in planning mode. When you start before comfort, you teach yourself that beginning doesn't have to feel good. You don't need excitement or inspiration to get moving. You simply need a trigger, and a timer is one of the simplest triggers available. You can use 5 minutes if you feel overwhelmed. You can use 20 if you're ready to commit a bit more. The length doesn't matter. What matters is that you begin exactly when you decide to begin. This builds trust in yourself, and that trust becomes the foundation for real productivity. As you continue this practice, you'll notice that your resistance gets quieter. You won't lose it completely, but it will shrink. It will stop feeling powerful. The moment you hear the timer beep, you'll feel a sense of direction instead of dread. Your brain becomes familiar with the routine, and once something becomes familiar, it becomes easier to follow. That's how discipline is built, not through intensity, but through consistency created by simple tools used every day. There's also a psychological shift that happens when you commit to a countdown. You turn the task into a small challenge rather than a looming obligation. A challenge feels more manageable. You know there's a clear start and a clear stop. You're not telling yourself to work for the entire day or finish everything in one sitting. You're only committing to the time on the timer. This removes the weight of huge expectations and lets you focus solely on the next few minutes. That small focus window is often enough to push you into a productive groove. Another important benefit of starting before comfort is that you learn to separate action from overthinking. Overthinking thrives when you allow too much open time before starting. The longer you wait, the more scenarios your mind creates. You start imagining the task being hard, boring, or impossible. You think about mistakes you might make. You exaggerate the difficulty. All of this happens before you even touch the work. But when you set a timer and begin immediately, you bypass the entire overthinking stage. You move directly into doing, and doing always shrinks fear. Once the first few minutes pass, your mind adjusts to the work. The discomfort fades, and a sense of control takes over. This shift never happens while waiting, only while doing. That's why starting early matters so much. It exposes you to the truth that action feels easier than anticipation. The anxiety you feel before starting is almost always heavier than the effort required to work. The timer helps you cross that invisible wall much faster. You don't need to be perfect with this method. You just need to practice it often. The more you use a timer, the more automatic the habit becomes. Eventually, you won't need the countdown to begin quickly, because your brain will already associate the decision to work with immediate action. But even then, the timer can remain a useful tool for structure, pacing, and preventing distractions from pulling you off track. You can apply this method to anything: work tasks, studying, chores, creative projects, workouts, planning, cleaning, or anything that normally feels like a challenge to begin. The timer makes everything feel simpler, smaller, and less emotionally heavy. Once you experience how much it changes your ability to start, you'll wish you had used it years earlier. The goal here is not to impress anyone. It's to break the habit of waiting for the perfect moment. By starting before comfort and allowing the timer to guide you, you move from a passive mindset to an active one. You take control of your time instead of letting your feelings decide for you. This single shift can change the entire rhythm of your days. Use it, repeat it, refine it, and watch how quickly your life begins to move forward again. Number 6, pick priority. Ignore perfect timing. Every day you face choices, and most of those choices compete for your attention. Some tasks feel urgent, some look easy, and some stay on your list for months because you keep waiting for a better moment to begin them. What you don't realize is that progress rarely depends on having the right time. Progress depends on deciding what matters most and acting on it, even when the moment feels inconvenient. When you choose a clear priority, you remove the need for the perfect moment. You stop drifting between tasks and start moving with intention. There's a calm that comes when you know the most important thing you need to handle. You no longer waste mental energy bouncing between options. You don't question whether you should be doing something else. You commit to the one action that actually pushes your life forward. But this clarity only happens when you deliberately select your priority instead of letting your day dictate it for you. If you leave your schedule open to impulse, you'll fall into a pattern where easy tasks keep replacing meaningful tasks. You'll stay busy but never feel accomplished. Picking your priority breaks that cycle because it forces your mind to focus on impact instead of convenience. Most people wait for the perfect timing because they hope for a moment when everything feels aligned. They want more free time, more energy, more clarity, or less pressure. But those ideal conditions rarely show up on their own. Even when they do, they don't last. If you depend on them, your momentum stops the moment life gets messy again. You need a system that works in real life, not in fantasy. That's why choosing one priority each day is powerful. It gives you something to follow regardless of mood or circumstance. It becomes your anchor when everything else feels chaotic. When you ignore the pressure to find the best time, you start discovering how much control you actually have. You stop basing your actions on comfort and begin basing them on purpose. The moment you commit to your priority, you're no longer waiting. You're making progress, even if the progress is small. That shift builds a stronger mindset because you start proving to yourself that you can move forward under any condition. You no longer think in terms of perfect circumstances. You start thinking in terms of responsibility. What most people don't understand is that perfect timing is usually just hesitation wearing a nicer outfit. It feels logical because it hides behind good intentions. You tell yourself you want to start when you can give your full attention. You want to begin when you feel more confident. You want a clean start, a quiet environment, or a clear head. But underneath those reasons is the simple truth. You're avoiding discomfort. You're trying to protect yourself from effort, uncertainty, or possible mistakes. Once you recognize this pattern, you take its power away. You stop letting it decide your pace. Picking a priority is not about ignoring everything else in your life. It's about refusing to scatter your energy across too many things at once. When you spread yourself thin, nothing gets done well and nothing gets completed on time. But when you choose your most important task and give it your focus, you build momentum. That momentum makes the rest of your tasks easier because your mind is already in a state of progress. Even if the rest of your day becomes unpredictable, you know the essential task is handled. It's normal to feel a bit of resistance when committing to one priority. Your brain is used to jumping between multiple responsibilities. It enjoys the distraction because distractions feel effortless. But distractions never move you closer to the life you want. To train your mind, you must return your attention to your priority whenever you feel yourself drifting. This repeated redirection strengthens your ability to stay focused. Over time, this ability becomes a skill that improves every part of your life: work, relationships, health, habits, and long-term goals. Another advantage of choosing a priority is that it removes decision fatigue. You don't spend the entire day figuring out what to do next. You already know. That simplicity is powerful. Most people lose hours each week debating what to start, when to start, and whether they should change their plan. That internal noise drains energy even before they begin working. You can silence all of it by determining your priority early in the day. Once it's chosen, you no longer negotiate with yourself. You execute. When you stop waiting for perfect timing, you accept that progress can look messy. Some days you'll feel unprepared. Some days you'll feel rushed. Some days you'll deal with stress, interruptions, or frustration. But progress still counts, even when it doesn't feel ideal. One small action done at the wrong time is still better than 10 perfect plans that never happen. Consistency matters more than comfort. Action matters more than mood. Growth matters more than the way the moment feels. Your priority can change each day depending on what stage you're in. Some days it might be learning something important. Some days it might be completing a task you've postponed. Some days it might be planning, creating, fixing, or finishing something that's been weighing on your mind. What matters is not the size of the task, but the impact it has on your future. When you choose the right priority, you reduce stress and gain clarity because you no longer feel torn between too many directions. One of the biggest shifts you'll notice is the way your confidence grows. When you act on your priority even when the timing isn't perfect, You start trusting yourself again. You see proof that you can handle discomfort. You see proof that you don't crumble under pressure. You see proof that you can control your day instead of letting your day control you. And that self-trust compounds. It makes you more decisive, more resilient, and more committed to your long-term vision. You're not trying to be flawless. You're trying to be consistent. You're not trying to eliminate challenges. You're learning to move through them. The more you show up for your priority, the easier it becomes to ignore the trap of waiting for ideal conditions. You replace hesitation with action. You replace excuses with movement. You replace doubt with evidence. And each day you do this, you reshape the way you approach your goal. Your life changes when your habits change. Your habits change when your decisions change. And your decisions change the moment you stop waiting for the perfect moment and start taking control of the moment you have. Picking your priority and acting on it, even when it feels uncomfortable, is one of the simplest ways to break out of stagnation. It gives you direction, purpose, and a clear path forward. Once you begin this process, you'll realize something powerful. Perfect timing was never the real problem. The real problem was hesitation disguised as planning. And now that you see through it, you can move forward freely. You choose what matters. You start when you decide. You follow through without waiting for conditions to align. And with that, your entire sense of progress begins to accelerate. Number 7. Break tasks smaller. Reduce overload. When a task feels too large, the mind reacts by pulling away from it. It's not that you lack discipline or ambition. It's that the human mind resists anything that feels heavy, unclear, or overwhelming. When something looks too big, your brain interprets it as a threat to your comfort and energy. So you stall, delay, or choose easier activities that offer a quick sense of completion. This reaction isn't a personal flaw. It's a basic survival pattern. The solution is simple but powerful. Break your task into pieces that are small enough for your mind to accept. When you reduce the size, you reduce the resistance. When you reduce the resistance, you increase the likelihood of action. There is a specific sense of relief that comes from splitting something overwhelming into manageable parts. The moment you divide a huge task into smaller steps, the fear of beginning fades. You no longer feel stuck or pressured. You see a path rather than a wall. This shift is what helps you move when you previously felt paralyzed. Many people assume they need more motivation to start, when what they really need is smaller steps to start with. Motivation grows once you're moving, not before. When you begin with a small step, you create a spark that encourages the next. Overload is often created not by the work itself, but by the way you hold it in your mind. When everything is lumped together, it feels like an impossible climb. You think of the final result, the hours required, the effort involved, and the mistakes you might make. This mental picture drains your energy before you even begin. But a large task is never completed in one moment. It's completed through a series of tiny, simple actions. When you recognize this, the burdens shrink. You stop thinking about the entire mountain and start noticing the next small movement forward. Breaking tasks into smaller pieces also reduces emotional pressure. Big tasks trigger doubts about whether you're capable, prepared, or intelligent enough to finish them. Small tasks bypass those insecurities because they don't feel risky. You're not asking yourself to be perfect. You're only asking yourself to complete something manageable. The quieter the fear, the faster the action. And once action begins, fear has less space to grow. That alone can change the way you approach goals. You stop dreading them and start engaging with them one piece at a time. Another benefit is that smaller steps give you more frequent wins. Each completed step becomes proof that you're capable. These small victories build momentum and strengthen discipline. When you complete several small steps in a row, you begin to trust yourself again. You no longer look at the task as an intimidating challenge. You view it as a sequence you can manage. This shift in self-belief is what pushes you to keep going, even on days when your energy is low or your mood is unstable. Small steps make your progress more sustainable because they're designed to be achievable. When you reduce overload through smaller steps, you also gain clarity. You understand what needs to happen first, then next, then after that. You're not trying to solve everything in one moment. You focus on what is directly in front of you. This kind of clarity is powerful because it eliminates the noise of unnecessary concerns. You don't waste time worrying about later stages that you can't handle yet. You stay grounded in the immediate step, which keeps you calm and productive. Many people feel overwhelmed because they think too far ahead. Smaller steps pull your attention back to the present action. The habit of breaking tasks into smaller parts also teaches you patience. You stop expecting results instantly. You learn to value consistent progress over immediate transformation. This mindset keeps you from giving up prematurely. When you expect a huge result right away, you risk disappointment and discouragement. But when you focus on completing one small step after another, you see progress forming gradually. This slow build creates stability. You no longer chase quick wins. You build lasting habits that support long-term success. Another advantage of this method is that it reveals the true nature of the task. Sometimes, what looks overwhelming is actually a combination of simple steps that only feel intimidating because they're bundled together. When you separate the steps, you often realize that none of them are as difficult as your mind imagined. This discovery boosts confidence because you see how manageable the process truly is. You stop believing the story that the task is too big or too complicated. You see it for what it is, a sequence of actions that can be completed over time. Reducing overload through smaller steps also trains you to focus on progress instead of perfection. Perfectionism thrives when tasks are left whole and untouched. The fear of making a mistake grows because you feel like the entire task must be executed perfectly in one attempt. But when you break it down, you allow yourself to learn and adjust as you go. You give yourself room to make small mistakes and correct them early. This removes the weight of perfection and helps you take action with a clearer mind. Small steps also make it easier to begin even when your motivation is low. When you face something large, your brain looks for excuses to postpone it. But when the first step is tiny, those excuses lose their strength. The task becomes too easy to reject. You can start even when you're tired, stressed, or unsure. You can start when your mood isn't ideal. You can start in 5 minutes instead of waiting for an hour of free time. This flexibility makes your habits more consistent because you no longer rely on perfect conditions. There is also a sense of control that comes from breaking things down. Big tasks make you feel powerless because they seem bigger than your current capacity. Smaller steps restore your sense of agency. You become the one directing the process, choosing the pace, and shaping the path. This feeling of control increases your momentum and reduces anxiety. You move with confidence because you're dealing with pieces you can handle. This approach also exposes hidden obstacles early. When you start with a small step, you quickly discover what tools, knowledge, or resources you need next. You don't wait until you're deep into the process to realize you're missing something important. Small steps help you adapt sooner, which prevents future frustration. You move forward with more awareness and fewer surprises. This makes the entire journey smoother and more predictable. Breaking tasks into smaller pieces makes recovery easier when you fall off track. If you stop for a day or two, you can jump back in without feeling defeated. You don't need to rebuild massive momentum. You just pick up the next small step. This reduces the risk of abandoning the goal altogether. People quit when they feel they need to climb the entire mountain again. But when the mountain is already broken into pieces, returning becomes simple. Overload disappears when you stop trying to conquer everything at once. Small steps protect your mind from burnout and protect your goals from neglect. They become a practical system for progress, a strategy that works regardless of your mood or circumstances. They turn discipline into something achievable rather than exhausting. They transform overwhelming tasks into something you can complete reliably and confidently. You can handle so much more than you think. But your power shows up when you remove unnecessary weight. Break it down. Shrink the steps. Choose the piece that fits your level right now. Do it with patience. Do it with intention. Do it without rush. Progress doesn't demand perfection. It demands movement. When you reduce overload through small, clear steps, you gain the strength, clarity, and consistency you need to complete anything you set your mind to. Number 8. Choose action over waiting always. Waiting feels safe because it gives you the illusion of control. You tell yourself that more clarity will come tomorrow, that you'll feel ready later, that the right moment is somewhere ahead, if you're patient enough. But every time you wait, you strengthen hesitation. You feed the habit of postponing the life you want. The truth is that action, not waiting, is what creates the clarity, confidence, and direction you think you need before you begin. Action turns uncertainty into understanding. Action turns fear into experience. Action turns doubt into progress. When you choose action over waiting, you stop placing your future in the hands of moments that may never arrive and start taking responsibility for what happens next. There is a quiet power in doing something now, even when the step feels small. When you take action, you disrupt the cycle of overthinking that keeps most people stuck. Overthinking convinces you that every decision requires long analysis, but the mind becomes clearer once you move. Your energy shifts from thinking to doing. You start learning from reality instead of imagining scenarios that may never happen. This shift from internal pressure to external progress brings you a sense of control that waiting can never provide. Waiting often disguises itself as planning. You convince yourself you need more research or more preparation before taking the next step, but too much planning turns into avoidance. You get comfortable organizing instead of creating. You feel productive without actually producing anything. That pattern quietly traps people for years. Action breaks the illusion because once you begin, you're forced to deal with the real task instead of the imagined version in your head. You make adjustments based on results, not theory. You learn what works and what doesn't through experience rather than endless guessing. Choosing action over waiting also changes the way you view mistakes. When you wait, mistakes seem intimidating. You fear getting something wrong because you see every attempt as a major event. But when you take action regularly, mistakes become normal. They become part of the learning process. You stop expecting perfection and start valuing progress. Mistakes turn into information that helps you move more intelligently. Instead of slowing down, they push you forward because you understand that errors are feedback, not evidence of failure. One of the most powerful effects of choosing action is the momentum it creates. Once you start, even with a small effort, you generate motion. That motion makes the next step easier. Your mind begins to shift from avoidance to engagement. You become someone who follows through instead of someone who watches opportunities pass by. Momentum has a compounding effect. Every action builds on the last. What felt difficult yesterday becomes manageable today, and what feels challenging today becomes easy tomorrow. Waiting never gives you this upward rhythm. Only motion does. Action also builds courage. You gain courage not from thinking about what could happen, but from facing it directly. Each time you step forward, you prove to yourself that you can handle discomfort. You show yourself that you don't break under pressure, that you don't collapse when uncertainty appears, and that you can survive moments that once felt intimidating. Courage doesn't come from ease. It comes from repeated exposure to small challenges. Waiting keeps you fragile. Action makes you resilient. Another important truth is that opportunities rarely wait for you. They appear and disappear quickly. The people who move first benefit the most because they're willing to take imperfect steps while others hesitate. When you choose action, you become someone who moves when direction is unclear, instead of waiting for conditions to be ideal. That willingness to move early opens doors. You receive experiences, lessons, and advantages that waiting cannot offer. You place yourself where progress happens, instead of standing on the sidelines hoping for a chance. Action sharpens your intuition. When you move consistently, you begin to sense what decisions align with your goals. You become better at recognizing what deserves your effort and what doesn't. This insight develops only through involvement, not through analysis. People who wait often feel confused because their intuition has never been tested. They haven't gathered enough experience to make confident decisions. But each action you take adds another layer of wisdom, making your future choices clearer and faster. Choosing action over waiting also prevents regret. Most people don't regret the steps they took. They regret the steps they avoided. They regret the times they waited too long, hesitated too much, or let chances fade. Action protects you from that pain, because even if something doesn't go as planned, you gain lessons that strengthen your character. You don't have to wonder what if, because you know, and knowing is always better than imagining. Knowledge moves you forward. Regret holds you still. Action reveals your true potential. You may think you know what you're capable of, but you don't discover your strength until you push your limits. Waiting keeps you inside your comfort zone, where your abilities stay dormant. Action pulls out skills you didn't realize you had. It shows you the depth of your determination, creativity, and endurance. People underestimate themselves when they spend too much time thinking. Your potential becomes visible only when you consistently put effort into something real. Another powerful benefit of choosing action is the sense of identity it builds. Every action you take shapes the way you see yourself. When you move forward regularly, you begin to see yourself as someone who gets things done, someone who doesn't need the perfect moment, someone who builds progress intentionally. This identity becomes a source of strength. It becomes a standard you hold yourself to. Waiting, on the other hand, weakens identity. It makes you feel powerless, passive, and disconnected from your goals. Action also makes your dreams feel closer. Goals that once felt distant start to look reachable because you're moving toward them consistently. Even if the progress is small, you feel advancement. You feel alive. You feel like you're participating in your own life, instead of watching it unfold without you. This sense of involvement creates purpose. It turns your days into steps towards something meaningful, rather than hours spent imagining possibility. You also begin to attract better habits when you choose action. You become more disciplined because you trust yourself to follow through. You become more focused because you learn to prioritize what matters. You become more organized because you need a system to support your momentum. These habits grow naturally from your commitment to movement. They strengthen over time and spill over into other areas of your life. The result is a more stable, productive, and intentional version of yourself. Choosing action over waiting doesn't mean rushing. It means refusing to freeze. It means recognizing that movement creates answers that waiting never will. It means understanding that clarity comes from effort, not from delay. You don't need the ideal conditions to begin. You only need a willingness to take the next step. The courage you seek, the confidence you want, the results you dream about, they all live on the other side of action. Every time you choose action, you reclaim control over your life. You stop depending on timing, luck, or perfect circumstances. You stop making progress conditional. You start treating your life as something you can shape, not something you must wait for. You move forward even when the path is unclear, because you trust that motion will reveal the next step. You choose action because you understand that waiting keeps you stagnant. You choose action because movement builds progress. You choose action because your future depends on what you do, not on what you delay. You choose action always, because life rewards those who step forward while everyone else hesitates. Number 9. Reward immediate effort. Build consistency. Rewarding immediate effort is one of the most overlooked strategies for building lasting discipline and consistent results. Most people focus entirely on long-term goals, treating success as something that exists far in the future. While goals are important, progress is shaped by what you do today, right now. Immediate effort deserves recognition because it creates a positive feedback loop in your mind. When you acknowledge the work you just completed, even in small increments, you reinforce the behavior that leads to achievement. This reinforcement trains your brain to seek action rather than hesitation. Consistency is rarely born from motivation alone. Motivation comes and goes, fluctuating with mood, energy, and circumstances. If you wait to feel inspired, most of your intentions will fade before they materialize. Rewarding immediate effort provides a stable mechanism to build habits that last, independent of how you feel. It ties your actions to tangible acknowledgement, which gives your mind a reason to continue. Even a brief moment of recognition can strengthen the neural pathways that create automatic behavior. This is why small rewards for effort are more powerful than distant promises of success. Immediate rewards do not have to be extravagant. They can be as simple as taking a short break after completing a difficult step, marking a task as done on a list, or even telling yourself quietly, "I accomplished this." The act of recognizing your work reinforces your behavior and shifts your attention from procrastination to achievement. Each small acknowledgement compounds over time, creating an internal system that values consistent action. Your brain begins to associate effort with positive outcomes, making it easier to repeat behaviors and maintain momentum. Building consistency through rewarding effort also reduces the temptation to chase instant gratification in other areas. When your mind experiences the satisfaction of recognizing genuine progress, it learns that delayed and meaningful rewards are valuable. You no longer rely solely on fleeting pleasures to feel accomplished. This creates resilience because your sense of satisfaction becomes aligned with purpose rather than distraction. You learn to enjoy the process, not just the end result, which is a critical factor in sustaining long-term achievement. Immediate rewards also help maintain focus on the next step. By acknowledging each effort as it happens, you stay grounded in the present moment rather than worrying about the overwhelming totality of a goal. Large projects or ambitious objectives can feel paralyzing if you concentrate solely on the end. Rewarding each completed step creates a mental checkpoint, marking progress and encouraging you to take the next action. These checkpoints act as milestones that make consistent movement possible, even when the journey feels long. Another key effect of rewarding immediate effort is its ability to strengthen self-trust. When you follow through and recognize your work, you signal to yourself that you are reliable. You show yourself that commitments to your own growth are meaningful and achievable. Over time, this builds confidence in your ability to handle challenges and take responsibility for your outcomes. A strong sense of self-trust is foundational for discipline because it reduces hesitation. You no longer doubt that your actions matter. You experience proof with every step. Immediate rewards also provide a buffer against discouragement. There will always be setbacks, slow days, and moments when the outcome seems distant. When you reward effort, you decouple your sense of achievement from the result. You focus on what you control, your actions, not on unpredictable external events. This mindset protects your motivation and preserves momentum. It teaches you that progress is not only measured by the finish line, but by the consistent steps you take along the way. Small acknowledgments of effort become the fuel that drives long-term consistency. The practice of rewarding immediate effort also helps refine your self-awareness. Each time you pause to recognize your work, you evaluate what you did, how it felt, and how it contributes to your goals. This reflection creates clarity about which actions are most effective and which habits need adjustment. You learn from your own behavior in real time. You develop a keen sense of what drives results and what slows you down, creating a feedback system that accelerates your growth. Rewarding effort cultivates a mindset of proactive action. When your mind expects a positive response from completing a step, it becomes naturally inclined to take action. You begin to anticipate the satisfaction of progress rather than dreading the work. This anticipation makes starting tasks easier and reduces procrastination. Action and reward become inseparable, creating a rhythm in which productivity and satisfaction feed each other continuously. This cycle is the foundation for building a high-performing daily routine. Immediate rewards also prevent the accumulation of mental fatigue. When you ignore small achievements, your brain only notices what remains undone. This focus on incompletion increases stress and decreases motivation. Recognizing effort, however, allows your mind to celebrate what has been accomplished, creating a sense of balance. You maintain energy for the next task because your mind experiences satisfaction rather than depletion. This creates a sustainable pace that supports long-term consistency without burnout. Another critical aspect is that rewarding immediate effort teaches you the value of incremental progress. Most people overlook the small victories because they're fixated on monumental outcomes. But long-term success is almost always built through repeated small actions. By consciously rewarding effort, you reinforce the importance of these incremental steps. You train yourself to see progress even when it doesn't feel dramatic. This perspective prevents discouragement and fosters patience, which is essential for sustained achievement. Building consistency through immediate reward also helps break cycles of procrastination. Procrastination often thrives because the mind associates effort with delayed gratification or discomfort. When you immediately recognize and reward a step, you create an alternative association. Effort leads to satisfaction now. This rewiring reduces resistance to starting tasks and increases follow-through. Your habits shift from avoidance to engagement, creating a pattern where action becomes the default response rather than hesitation. Finally, immediate effort rewards foster a mindset that aligns your daily behaviors with your long-term goals. Each small acknowledgement creates a bridge between what you do now and what you hope to achieve later. It ensures that every action contributes to growth rather than becoming lost in distraction. You see tangible evidence that your daily choices matter, reinforcing a sense of agency and purpose. This connection between effort and reward strengthens consistency because it continually reminds you why your actions are important and worth repeating. When you reward immediate effort consistently, you create a self-sustaining cycle of discipline. Every acknowledgement strengthens your habits, reinforces your priorities, and builds momentum. You stop relying on rare moments of motivation and instead cultivate a reliable system that ensures action regardless of mood or circumstance. Consistency becomes natural, and over time it compounds into the kind of progress that transforms your life. Immediate effort is the most practical, powerful tool to create lasting habits and measurable success. Number 10. Expect mistakes. Move forward anyway. Mistakes are inevitable. Every person who has ever achieved anything meaningful has stumbled along the way. Failure is not a sign of weakness. It is a natural part of the process. The problem is not that mistakes occur, it's how we respond to them. Most people freeze, analyze endlessly, or avoid taking further action because they fear repeating errors. This hesitation stops growth in its tracks. The most effective approach is to anticipate mistakes, accept them as part of the journey, and continue moving forward regardless. When you adopt this mindset, every setback becomes a lesson instead of a roadblock. Progress becomes inevitable because you no longer wait for perfection before acting. Expecting mistakes changes the way you view action entirely. When you move forward, you don't need everything to be flawless. You don't need complete knowledge, perfect timing, or the ideal conditions. You simply need the courage to begin and the willingness to adjust as you go. Mistakes are not detours. They are signposts showing where you can improve. Each error provides clarity, highlighting the steps that require attention and refining your approach. Once you see mistakes as informative rather than punitive, the fear of starting diminishes. You take action with a mindset of experimentation, knowing that missteps are both inevitable and useful. This approach builds resilience. Resilience is not the absence of errors. It is the ability to recover from them quickly and keep moving forward. Every time you encounter a mistake and persist, you strengthen your mental toughness. You learn that discomfort is temporary, that failure does not define your worth, and that progress is measured by your willingness to continue despite imperfection. Resilience grows with repeated exposure to challenges, and the more mistakes you navigate without losing momentum, the stronger your resolve becomes. When mistakes happen, they reveal gaps in preparation, knowledge, or execution. This information is invaluable. Waiting until everything is perfect to act hides these gaps, leaving you in a state of perpetual inaction. Mistakes expose weak points quickly, giving you the opportunity to correct course immediately. This accelerates growth because every misstep becomes a learning event. Over time, your strategies, skills, and judgment improve because you've tested them against real-world challenges. No theoretical preparation can match the lessons learned through action, coupled with mistakes. Expecting errors also changes how you plan. You begin to create systems and approaches that accommodate imperfection. You no longer rely on rigid expectations that collapse under pressure. You design routines that are flexible, allowing you to recover quickly when something goes wrong. This flexibility reduces stress because you know that missteps are normal and manageable. You move forward with confidence because your structure is not dependent on every outcome being ideal. It is built to adapt and sustain progress. Mistakes also teach humility. They remind you that no matter how skilled, intelligent, or prepared you are, uncertainty is part of life. Accepting this reality prevents arrogance and overconfidence. It allows you to approach each task with attention, care, and openness to learning. Humility becomes a tool for improvement because it keeps you aware of areas where growth is possible. Expecting mistakes transforms setbacks from moments of shame into opportunities for development, making every challenge more constructive. When you anticipate errors, decision-making becomes faster. Fear of failure is a major source of hesitation. People delay action because they imagine worst-case scenarios. Once you acknowledge that mistakes are normal, you reduce that fear. You make choices more decisively because you understand that even if an error occurs, it is manageable. Action becomes the default response, and hesitation loses its power. Quick, informed action propels you forward, while excessive worry leaves you stagnant. Expecting mistakes fosters creativity. When the fear of error is removed, experimentation becomes possible. You are willing to test new ideas, take calculated risks, and explore uncharted paths. Innovation thrives in environments where failure is seen as part of the process. By embracing mistakes, you open the door to solutions and approaches that waiting for perfect conditions would never reveal. Each attempt provides insight, refining both your methods and your perspective. This dynamic approach accelerates growth far more effectively than cautious perfectionism. Mistakes also deepen self-awareness. When an error occurs, it provides feedback about your habits, choices, and mindset. You learn where you are reactive, careless, or hesitant. You uncover blind spots that would remain hidden without real-world testing. Reflection on these mistakes allows you to adjust strategies, build better habits, and strengthen areas of weakness. Over time, this consistent feedback loop creates a refined, efficient, and self-aware approach to all challenges. Persistence in the face of mistakes develops discipline. Each time you move forward after an error, you reinforce the habit of continuing regardless of discomfort. Discipline is built not in moments of comfort, but in the choice to keep going when failure seems likely. This habit of persistence becomes automatic over time. You stop waiting for ideal conditions, knowing that the act of moving forward itself produces progress. Mistakes are no longer obstacles, they are the proving ground for your commitment. Expecting mistakes also prevents perfectionism from sabotaging progress. Waiting for perfect results before acting creates paralysis. You remain idle, imagining ideal conditions that rarely exist. Accepting that errors are inevitable allows you to act immediately, understanding that adjustments will follow naturally. You focus on continuous improvement rather than flawless execution. This mindset ensures that you are always moving, always learning, and always evolving. Mistakes help build a long-term perspective. You begin to see setbacks as temporary and growth as cumulative. A single error does not define your trajectory. It is merely a point on the larger path. By maintaining forward motion, you create momentum that cannot be undone by isolated failures. The aggregate of consistent effort outweighs individual missteps. This perspective prevents discouragement, sustains motivation, and reinforces the value of persistence over perfection. Moving forward despite mistakes cultivates confidence. Confidence is not the absence of failure. It is the assurance that you can handle whatever arises. Each time you encounter a mistake and continue, your belief in your ability to adapt strengthens. You start trusting your judgment and your capacity to learn from experience. This self-trust becomes a foundation for tackling increasingly complex challenges, as you understand that failure is never final, but progress is continuous. Mistakes also improve problem-solving skills. When an action doesn't go as planned, you are forced to analyze, adapt, and find solutions. This iterative process sharpens critical thinking and decision-making. You learn to anticipate potential challenges, develop contingency plans, and approach tasks with strategic flexibility. Every error becomes a lesson that informs your future actions, making each subsequent attempt more effective and refined. Finally, moving forward despite mistakes reinforces the mindset that action is the ultimate driver of success. Waiting, overthinking, or fearing error delays progress indefinitely. Action, even when imperfect, produces results, feedback, and momentum. Every step builds experience, knowledge, and confidence. Mistakes are simply milestones on the journey, marking your commitment to growth. Accept them, learn from them, and continue advancing, because progress is not found in perfection. It is found in persistence. By expecting mistakes and choosing to move forward anyway, you transform obstacles into opportunities, hesitation into motion, and setbacks into lessons. You no longer wait for ideal conditions or fear failure. You take control of your path, embracing each challenge with courage, resilience, and unwavering commitment to progress.